Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the late edition of Autumn Colors. Autumn Colors is a red tea. I apologize for starting a little late. Some mornings I just can't get it together, but here I am now. By the end of this session, you're going to know more about so-called Din Hung. Din Hung is Yunnan red, and we're going to talk about the start of it. We're going to talk about the history of it. In addition to that, we're going to start out with some shop news. And in the feel of what we've done the last week, we're going to continue staying in a rather present area of time. So what do I mean? We're not going to be talking about stuff 1,000 years ago, 500 years ago. We're going to be present. We're going to talk a little bit about history. But first, let's start with shop news. So this week, lots of good things at the shop. But the number one thing I really want to talk about is Jonathan asked me a question yesterday, and it made me realize I haven't done a good enough job of explaining everything related to quality of tea. In other words, grades of tea. So Jonathan pointed out that there's some who knows who's selling Jin Junmei, which we did last week, Harold, for $10 an ounce. And so let's review the facts for a minute. The first fact is when you're at a high grade of this tea, how many hand motions did I say it takes to pick it? I said a pound, between 50,000 to 80,000. So that's the first thing. Why does it take so many? Because in the origin place of where this is grown, the buds are tiny. There are no leaves. It's bud only. As soon as you pick and you use a different varietal, you pick from a different area, you add a leaf onto that, all of a sudden, the cost of doing it is less. So that's one thing when you're talking about grade. The other thing that's really important is area where it's grown. If it's really from Tung Mu Guan, it's like I said last week, it's like Kona coffee. Everybody says, oh yeah, I got Jinju Mei. And then you add up all the advertisements and all the amounts that seem to be out in the market, and it's much more than the total volume of what's produced in Tung Mu Guan. Ooh, this is like the Kona coffee scandal. Exactly like. We're the same thing. You know, everybody say, oh, yeah, we got this premium Kona coffee selling all over the United States. All of a sudden, you start to add up how much there is. Then you look at how much is produced. There's LCSers in the cracks. So that's the first thing to be aware. You always have to ask yourself provenance. You have to ask yourself process and attention to handcraft. Those three things. And those three things will tell you the price right away. If you get a price like $10 an ounce, you know one or all three of those things are wrecked. They're not what they think you are. They're not what you think they are. They're not as advertised. So that's one really important thing. I was really happy when Jonathan brought that up because I realized the same question comes about Dragonwell from certain areas, from Cliff Teas from certain. This is repeated over and over again because people fall for scams. And the scam is around the tea that's produced and where it's produced and how it's produced. Very simple. All right, so that was one of the things I really wanted to address since we just talked about Jinjumei last week. The second thing I want to address this morning, I don't always have a big old script, and it's really helpful when you all ask questions. It's really helpful when questions are asked in here. And Ryan asked a question about one of the photographs. So one of the photographs that we sent out looks like some tree, and it's got a little scaffolding around it and so forth. Let me talk to you about this tree. This tree is 3,500 years old. This is more than ancient tree. As far as we understand, this is the oldest tea tree in China. Now, in the Ilau Mountains, they claim that their 2,700, 2,800-year-old tree is the oldest tree. But that doesn't appear to be correct. But you know what? No matter what, it's interesting to see both those trees. You've seen pictures of that 2,800-year-old tree. It's much taller than the one that is in the picture you have, and it spreads out more. This is almost like a tree bush in a way, almost like the difference between a redwood and a oak that has spread out. And that's kind of how I thought about it. So that means it's actually a different varietal, but it is that old. When you look around where that tree is, all these smaller trees with enormous buds are growing in that area. Fengcheng is a hugely rich area of ancient tree tea. They have probably the most concentrated amount. And really, I talked about being Fengcheng. It's more proper to call it Lincang. Lincang includes almost like a county area in which many of these old trees and ancient trees exist. So that's the background, and I wanted to kind of get you situated. And by the way, the day we were there, we weren't supposed to be so close. We were close by accident. And there's a whole long story behind this, including a missed plane flight the day before, which allowed us to end up walking right up to that tree and touching the trunk. Unbelievable. And then picking up some of the leaves that have fallen to the ground. So, and it's the one day of the year that they pick it. They pick it and then they auction it. And they auction what they pick for about $100,000. That's what it went at the time that we took that picture. It was about $100,000. I forget how much that is, but it's not very much. The money amount is a lot, but the amount of leaves is not very much at all. And it goes towards the government so that they can maintain that area. So normally that area is completely closed off. Normally there's not scaffolding there. The scaffolding was so that people could climb up in the tree and pick it. It's just and we arrived before anybody got there. Television crews came soon after we arrived because they actually filmed the picking up. This is a very famous tree in Fengcheng. All right, Dianhong. So let me ask you the following question, because I don't think I've made this point clearly enough. Was Dianhong, which literally means Yunnan red, using an indigenous word for the Din, or for Yunnan, I should say, was that in existence, say, in the 1800s, 1700s? Because it's red tea, right? And hasn't red tea been around for a while? So the answer is yes, it's been around for a while. And the other part of the answer is no, it is not it is brand new. It is not part of that history. So what is the history of Dien Hun? The history of Dien Hun really starts in 1938. As I said, we were going to keep this a little bit shorter history. We're not going back thousands of years. What happened in 1937 that caused 1938 to occur? And if you answer the passing of time, that's not the right answer. The right answer is in 1937, the Japanese moved from northeast China into Beijing, and then everybody knew from Beijing south, invasion is full scale on. And so the result is the government, in conjunction with tea owners or tea producers, produced a plan or worked up a plan to get the process somewhere else. Why did they do this? Well, they knew there was going to be disruption, but why was this so important? They needed foreign currency. They needed the currency to buy weapons. So the KMT, the Kuomintang, worked with the factory. The communists, in conjunction, worked and said, yeah, this is a good idea because, we're fighting the Japanese. Yes.
Jennifer asked, is this the same area where Black Beauty?
Great question. So Jennifer asks, is Black Beauty from the Fengcheng Lingsang area? And the answer is no. Black Beauty comes from the Ailao area. So where is Ailao in relationship to that? It's probably about 200 miles away, and it's more centrally located within Yunnan Province. So this person, who was a tea expert from Chiman factory, traveled south, traveled into Yunnan. His instructions, his brief: go as far away, stay in China, go as far away from where we are now, find material where we can grow. So the brief was either find existing material or find material where the soil is correct, where it seems like the right conditions, and we can grow tea. He made his way, Feng Xiaoqiu, that's his name. He made his way down to Yunnan, and he heard, in Linsang, in Fengcheng, which is in Linsang, they have tea trees. You ought to go there. Took him about 2 weeks from Kunming. Very difficult journey because you didn't have the infrastructure that you have now. Makes it down there and right away realizes, we have some material here. Set up a factory really quickly. So this is 1938, and actually was able to pick a crop and produce a product. The product was so good that they kind of smuggled it out of Yunnan through Hong Kong, went to Britain to auction, and it made a ton of money. And they knew they were on the right track. Good. Foreign currency will start coming our way. So this is what led to Dien Hun. Pre-1938, you didn't have such a thing as Dien Hun. The tea in Yunnan was basically being produced as a fully fermented tea or a raw black. One of those two choices. That's how it was being produced. And one of you is going to catch me on a mistake. You're right. In fact, I think all of you, the light came on. That can't be right. And you're right. It's not right. So what was being produced in 1938 in Yunnan? It was raw black, was essentially what was produced. Then, over a period of time, some of that turned into fully fermented because they didn't have that composting process at that time. So that's why you have to be careful when you speak about this. Yes, they did have fully fermented, but that took years and years and years. All right. So we've got ourselves set up in 1938. Let's fast forward. Let's fast forward to, say, 1949. You know what? Let's go a little bit later, 1950, 1951. How much tea overall in China was being produced? 7,500 tons. Now think about that for a minute. That's the total tonnage of what was produced, all styles of tea. How about in early 2000s, say 2010 or so? How much tea, total tonnage, was being produced? Over 600,000 tons of tea. So this shows you how important tea has become over the years, especially recently, because this has generated currency, foreign currency for the Chinese. It's helped enrich the peasants' lives. Lots and lots of positive things. The development of Dianhong is central to this because lots of tonnage, relatively speaking, over the years was able to be produced. And it was well liked right from the beginning. You got the nice flavors. You got a different type of feel than, say, the Fujian Reds. You got a deeper feel than the Chiman Reds. It was distinctly different. Why? Again, they used Chiman methodology, but this was tea trees. In Chiman County, did they have tea trees? The answer is no. They had tea bushes, different varietals. And so the result was you were getting a different flavor profile. You had different terroirs, so you're getting a different flavor profile. So what's the basic process of making autumn colors? Well, first off, it's not an ancient tree. It's actually monoclonal that grows in Fengqing. But I wanted to talk about all these things because they're all linked together. The basic process is to pick. When you pick, oh, and this is a bud and two leaves. When you pick, what is the most important thing if you're doing red tea that you've got to focus on? That is, you can't let it be out in the tea fields too long. Why? Because as you put it in the basket and you shake the basket, what happens? The tea leaves become bruised and you start the process of oxidation. You don't want that. That's uncontrolled oxidation. We don't want that at all. If you want great tea, you want somehow to have some measure of understanding of that oxidation, and you want to control it. And we'll talk in a minute about how to control it. So the first step is to pick relatively quickly, get it back to the factory. What's the first thing you do when you get it back to the factory? You gotta make sure that the tea leaves are pliable enough to work with. How do you do that? You wither, you spread it out. And for the most part in Yunnan, sun-dried. Occasionally, you would use a little heat, but not normally. Normally, you wither that outside. You get it into a condition where the leaves are pliable. After they're pliable, then you purposely bruise them. And you can use a machine. There's a machine that rotates and squeeze all the juices together, and it's all sticky and a beautiful smell and so forth. And after that, then you let it oxidize. You pile it and you let it actually go through the oxidation process. So what's the magic about that? That sounds simple. That sounds like even we could do that. Well, how I described it was just simple. And yes, we could do just that. but understanding at what point, ooh, that smell is the correct smell. We're going to bake it. By the way, when they bake their tea, they bake their tea at a higher temperature than they do in Yunnan County. So there is a difference there. Sometimes there are other differences in terms of processing, but I've given you the generalized outline, which is what you need to understand in order to understand today's tea, autumn colors. After you, oh, and I told you I was going to tell you how they control oxidation. So how do they control oxidation again? By temperature. So when you first squeeze the juices out of the tea leaves, prior to piling it, you have to pull everything apart. Why? Because it's too hot. Too hot. Were you applying heat? No, this is just the friction of doing this process. You get that temperature up to a certain degree and it oxidizes so fast, it's kind of oxidation out of control. And again, what's the bell curve range? 32 degrees Fahrenheit, zero oxidation, essentially zero. 88 degrees, oh my God, there's oxidation without breaks. 150 degrees, you're reaching the end point of that type of oxidation. In other words, that's why when you want to stop oxidation, either bake or you fry, and you've got to be hotter than 150 degrees, otherwise it'll continue. You do it at a higher temperature and it stops it faster. So what happens if the farmer, let's say the farmer's very busy, has a bunch of projects, is oxidizing the tea, and gets distracted and over-oxidizes? What does over-oxidize even look like? Well, it looks like a four-letter word is what it looks like. And that four-letter word is sour. If you ever taste a black tea that's sour, first off, if you're with a group of people, don't say that word out loud. Just let them all kind of say, oh gosh, this tastes strange. Especially if the farmer's there, because that's clearly a mistake. If you go beyond 91, 92, 93% oxidation, you will get to sour. When you get to sour, is there any way to correct that? For the most part, no. I mean, it's kind of like when you put your cookies in the oven, 425, and the recipe said 10 minutes. In 18 minutes, you suddenly look because you smell the cookies. Oh, those are burnt. See, how are we going to fix that? The answer is you're not going to fix that. You've overdone it. And so that's the edge of where the farmer has to be. By the way, as part of an anecdotal story here, on farms in Yunnan, where they're doing this Dianhun, you can find those farms without a map. How does that occur? You use your nose. The smell is so rich and sweet and floral. You just follow your nose. It gets stronger and stronger as you get to the source. It's unbelievable. And we've experienced this before as we're going through areas of Yunnan. Oh, they must be working on getting that tea ready. So after you have oxidized, after the farmers oxidized it to where they want, they then bake it. They bake it longer and hotter than they do in either Fujian or in Yunnan County. And then they come out with their result. What else is different about, what did Feng Xiaoqiu have to worry about when he was in Yunnan trying to get this thing started? Well, he had to worry about the fact the soil was different and that the weather conditions are different. This, by the way, is a transition to the next subject I'm going to talk about, global warming. How is global warming affecting the tea crop? And I'm probably running out of time. That's what I thought. This will be a short explanation of this. I'll tell you that the two things that researchers have discovered is that temperature and water are the two most important factors. There's a bunch of other factors that are affected by global warming, but those two factors are the most important. So temperature is an interesting thing because as it gets warmer, and there's lots of current research in China about this, 56% of the area where they can grow tea, they can't get good tea because currently it's still too cold for parts of the year. But their projections are, so global warming in theory should be great, right? Everything gets warmer. Oh, this 56% area where the soil is appropriate, but it's too cold. And actually, that's what's happening. That is becoming, you can actually grow crops. The only problem, it's just like oxidation. You got a bell curve, right? So too cold, we all understand. You've never seen tea grown in Alaska or Siberia. Can't happen. But let's think about it in a minute. How about tea in Death Valley? Or how about tea in the Mojave Desert? Now, obviously in California, the terroir is all wrong. I'm not talking about the weather. I'm talking about the soil. But how about tea in Southwest China where it's already there? They are projecting that there is a heat cutoff. If it gets too hot, then those bushes won't produce. So it's interesting. You've got both things. You've got to the north, there's going to apparently be more areas where you can grow. And in the Southwest, where you have all these trees and everything, it's going to harm those. By the way, the trees themselves, while they've been doing this climate-related global warming research, one of the things they've been looking at is, can they tell by cutting into these trees and looking at the rings? Is there information about the climate? And can they look backwards in time? And the answer is yes. And they're getting cleverer and cleverer about this. It's a really fascinating field. And the Chinese are all over it. And why are they all over it? You heard the real reason. It's a huge cash crop for them, isn't it? All right. Yeah, I've spoken longer than I should have, but that's okay. These are all things I wanted to get out there. It is now my great pleasure to have the most talented, most beautiful tea master, Bijou, come and demonstrate how to brew autumn colors, and after the demonstration to brew with you. So without further ado, Bijou.
Hi. Yes. Hello, good morning. 早上好. So we do other colors. So Yunnan tea. So 他们可以听到我。
I'm sure.
So we have this tea used 5 grams, 3 minutes. Okay, so 5 grams.
All right, so she's the normal setup here. Tea tray. What you need are 2 cups and a strainer.
Yeah. So the temperature in order, so 175, right? 170. Yeah, 175.
It doesn't say clean.
But for me, so when I do myself, so I know this tea, so it's handcraft. The leaves, so out from the baby, so harvest pig, so the loose leaf doesn't like the heat. So we try dissipate steam, okay? So I use it usually, actually, the 172,
172, okay.
yeah.
I sent out
Yeah.
175,
175,
and it's 2 minutes.
so
It's 2 minutes. So she's dissipating the steam, aerating the water.
clean first.
Clean. Make sure
Clean
everything
first,
is
yeah.
very clean. Tea loves cleanliness.
Right now I pick up 175 temperature water.
175. She's drawing that water. Gradually dissipating the steam. You notice the rhythm. Just a nice, steady rhythm. Not in a hurry, but directed. Who asked that? Oh, wow. Rob is a scientist, and I love his approach to thinking about things. So his commentary was something like, how would we fix sour? Normally, we would use baking soda or something. Probably not a good result. And that's right. Once you go down that road, it's really hard because we're talking about finished product. Short of a finished product, there's lots of things you can do, but when you're at a finished product position, it's really, really hard. Particularly if you've blown it to a large degree. If you're on the very edge, there actually are a couple things you can do. No, so then, but they go wontons.
Okay.
Yeah. There are a couple things you can do, but for the most part, farmers understand and try and keep away from that. It's interesting. So what's the difference, for example, between this style of Dianhong and what they're doing in the Ailau Mountains? Because Jennifer brought up Black Beauty just a few minutes ago. There's a huge difference because this is oxidized much closer to the 90%. The Black Beauty is oxidized under 90%, and probably 3 or 4 percentage points underneath 90%. What's the difference? So Black Beauty, you may remember, for those of you who've had it, has kind of a really strong, almost like it's a very distinctive flavor that catches you right away. This, you're going to have a little bit of a difference when you taste it. And this is truly representative of original processing of Dianhong. And this comes from the home area. Yeah.
Supporting the sweet.
Love this. Warm hay supporting the sweet fruit. What fruit? Plums and caramel. Almost everybody in China. And thank you last week for the commentator asking me to talk about how they would talk about teas in China. The Chinese would typically have that caramel flavor. Caramel and malty is generally speaking how they would describe this, but they would understand the plum comment. They'd understand the haze as an underlying base for those smells. Yeah, they'd understand that. Timer has gone off. And you right away are going to see something different with this one. Think about Harold last week. What did Harold look like? Harold didn't look like this. Harold looked very light. In fact, Harold looked like we made a mistake. This looks like real tea. Wow, this has real body. By the way, Harold wasn't a mistake, as you know. So we're going to enter the tea quality arena, and let me do that right now. Remember, I'm checking first for astringency, then second for aftertaste, and then how do I feel? And remember to take notes because we still have one more next week. Second time I go through this, I'm going to reaffirm what I'm feeling this first time. And then I'm also going to focus on aroma and taste. Oh, yeah, your turn. So make sure you have your timer set for 2. Tea Master getting the water ready. And remember, when you brew these things, brewing them at a slightly lower temperature is never a mistake. It never is. That brings more flavor. So the one thing I want you to do after you enter the quality arena is truly think about the difference between this and Harold, because they really are very different teas, though they're made in the same generalized style. And it's a location, so weather terroir, a soil terroir, and a processing difference. Yeah.
It's like
Yeah, isn't that beautiful? Rob comments that you got brown and blonde leaves, slightly orangish. It's really attractive. Look at the beautiful rhythm that the tea master has. Just all about, she has a routine. It's the same every time. All right. So you put your water in, just as she has. Set the timer. Make sure your recipient cup is heated. Time for a beautiful tea almost. Okay, so yes. Oh, that's great. Jonathan is thinking, which tune? I'll have to think about which tune we should make tea to, because yeah, we could develop a workout rhythm of some sort. It's funny when you see tea masters in China making tea, you always are aware of the rhythm they're using, and they all use a little bit different rhythms. And one of the things that if you're in company making the tea, that would be a distraction would be some sort of extraneous movement, because for tea masters, the movement is fairly constrained. The music wouldn't be a distraction, by the way. So if you had the right type of music but weren't dancing to it, then that could be really dancing rhythm. Dancing rhythm is just as powerful and good as dancing, up and down, right? So the other aspect of this tea, remember that this also, just like last week, is what you would say the monoclonal bush tea, but this has more body because it's not needle only. Yeah. So Jen notes that this tea has a light and gentle flavor. It's absolutely true. And in general, Dien Hung is going to have that type of profile. Yeah.
So warm leaves have hints of chocolate.
Warm leaves have hints of chocolate and malt. This is a great observation. Chinese would absolutely agree with that. And then the tea water,
It's printed tea water, just saying malt aroma into the tea water, but it's interwoven then with caramel.
I love this comment. So the malt aroma interweaves within the tea water with the caramel. So the Chinese would recognize what you're saying right away, all aspects of that comment. And it's a beautiful comment because your prototypical Dinhungs, your prototypical Yunnan Reds are going to have these type of hints in them. And sometimes they're very strong and sometimes they're lighter. This tends to be stronger. Oh, you're not in. Yes, you are entering the quality arena. No, you're not. Wait a minute.
Yes.
Am I
We're
still
going soon. We're on the second step here of them
okay.
officially entering into the quality arena.
Okay.
Any minute.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So again, the other thing to note about this is just how different this color is. Because remembering Harold last week, how light it was, this, because it's got leaf material in it, has a much deeper color. So that's one thing you can learn right away. When you have a red tea and the people don't identify, they don't show you the leaves, you look at the color. Okay, well, this has some color. It probably has more leaves in it. Or, as in the case of Black Beauty, which is even darker than this. Black Beauty has leaves and what else? It's got little stems in it as well. So you have the richness of that all reflected in the color. The other reason that the Dianhongs tend to use more leaves rather than just buds is because the palate in Yunnan tends to be heavier. So they're eating spicier / barbecue foods. Yeah.
Jonathan says, I hearken back to the other reds from Yunnan, spring exhalations in particular. This is more subtle, but there are those spicy notes like those I loved in spring exhalations. Any sense of where that spice feeling comes from, opposed to the deep sweetness more common from Yunnan reds?
Great commentary. So Jonathan brings up that when you actually are present and take your time going through the tea, and this is why I love this comment, because this isn't a casual observation. It's not a casual drinker. It's a person who's fully present. Slight hints of spiciness in this. And he thinks about, it reminds him faintly of spring exhalations, which had much stronger hints of spiciness. And his question is, what causes that? And I have to admit, I don't know. And this is such a great question, though. I am stimulated to look and see what the Chinese scientists have commented in relationship to that, because there are other teas that have hints of spiciness, and I kind of remember that they point towards certain compounds. I just simply can't bring them to the mind now. I will check.
Rob notes the flavor of the tea water is strong, but also round. It feels velvety on the tongue.
The great observation. This has a roundness to it, almost a velvety. And Rob is careful with his words. I like this carrot because he didn't say silkiness. He said velvety. Velvety indicates a heavier roundness, and it is heavier. Think again of Harold for a minute. Harold, if you had to make a comparison of any sort, you might have said, that's closer to a juiciness, therefore you tend to drink it faster. This has more density to it. And that density causes you, actually slows you down. So in general, I want to clear up one thing and then we'll call it a wrap. And the one thing is Dianhong and the name Yunnan Reds, because in the past, we've had people come in here and say, oh, I want Dianhong. And that's fine. You know, it's nice to show off that you understand a Chinese term. But what you're not showing off is a depth of knowledge about Dianhong, because there are hundreds of Dianhong. So that's why, especially in a shop like this, you got to tell me roughly where you want the flavor profile to be. Because if you just say a Dianhong, that's not helpful. I'll tell you it's not helpful, and I'll get you on the road. But when you go to a shop that has scope, and by the way, do most shops have 10, 20, 30 Dianhongs? No, they usually have one, occasionally two. And so that's why I think people get in the habit of thinking that there's only one or two Dianhongs, and that simply isn't true. Good. Well, I've enjoyed this session with all of you. I congratulate you for immediately sensing a differentness about this tea versus Harold. They're very different. Both very good for different reasons. We love this tea and always have when it's been in the shop. So next week, your responsibility, aside from staying healthy and not getting sick, is to kind of be relaxed. Eh? Why would I tell you, oh, next Saturday, we're going to do relaxation? And no, we're not going to do yoga, the tea relaxation. All right. You guys have a great week. We'll see you next Saturday. You take care now. Bye-bye.